My friends, what lays before you is the myriad knowledge of an unfathomable universe. Join our intrepid remembrancers as they explore the heresy as history. From deep within the farthest reaches of the great library of Tiska, we are the Heresy Grad School. So said the War Master in his wisdom. Go forth, my sons, and illuminate them.
Okay. So are we ready to go?
I think so.
Yeah. What are you working on over there?
Me?
Yeah, you. I hear you shaking something or doing something. Yeah, whatever that is.
That's just my pen. Sorry,
Oh.
I'll put it down.
No, I mean, we're in grad school. You're allowed to have pens, so.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Heresy Grad School, part of the Remembrancers Retreat. I'm here with Professors Jason, Dave, and myself, Pat, and we're continuing our coverage of Paramar.
What's going on, guys?
What's up, guys?
Alright, so, Paramar. Paramar is a big deal. I'm a big fan. Why is it a big deal? We talked about that a little bit last time. So, besides being a very vital linchpin in so many things, both that are important to both the War Master and the Emperor, it's almost dead center in the warp lanes between Istvan and Terra. That's a big deal. It's also a huge military cachet that's been kind of taken over and populated by the Mechanicum of Griffon 4 for a while now. So we know it's important. So what's the War Master going to do about it? Now, to kind of set the scene a little bit, timeline-wise, this is just after the drop site massacre of Istvan 5. The Salamanders, the Raven Guard, and the Iron Hands have been pretty close to eliminated as viable threats. And the War Master's pretty happy with how that's gone. Maybe not so happy with how Istvan 3 has gone. Because if you remember our coverage of that from way, way back, that was a huge turd storm for Horus. A lot of stuff kind of kicked off too early. A lot of his plans kind of got kicked awry because there were a few too many witnesses that got out. And now, especially after Istvan 5, the whole of the Imperium doesn't know what's going on, but a whole lot more parties than Horus would like know what's going on. So, Istvan 5 is kicked off pretty well. And Horus has managed to piece together all of these legions that he is decently sure at least have enough motivation to work with him against the Emperor. Angron, for one, is very consistent in his thought process of he's not allied with Horus, he's just against the Emperor. But for now, that suits Horus, just fine. As long as he can kind of keep him under control and keep him pointed in approximately the right direction to cause enough problems for the Loyalists and less for him. So, Paramar is something the War Master has kind of a dual purpose for. First off, it is very well defended by Mechanicum forces, by the Armada Imperialis, and so he can't just send a tiny little fleet to try and take it over. This is not going to be a small sortie. This is a massive system with 20 planets or so that many of which are valuable strategic assets. So he can't send a small fleet, because that'll just get immediately defeated. But he also runs the risk of making too large of a commitment, because if he makes too large of a commitment too early, a lot of his forces and resources will be tied down in this sort of protracted siege of a system, instead of the more shock and awe effect he wants to go for. And on top of that, something too large really risks drawing too much attention from the segmentum solar. Keep in mind, Paramar is directly on the outer northern edge of the segmentum solar. So Horus does not want to have too many of his forces tied down and have the Sol system at large know exactly where a lot of his resources are. I've said many, many times that one of the best things Horus has going for him, and one of the worst choices Dorn kind of made as the sort of, de facto military leader of the Loyalists is that he hunkered down in Terra for the most part. The Khan and Korax got into several arguments with Dorn over the length and breadth of both the Black Library books and the Black books over it being a bad idea, that they need to be out to range, to see where Horus is, to see what Horus is doing, and that their forces don't work well in a stagnant defensive position. Because Horus literally has the entirety of the galaxy open to him. Like, Dorn does not know, comparatively, where Horus is or what Horus is doing. Whereas Horus knows exactly what the end game is going to be, where Dorn is, the more or less the extent of Dorn's, resources and his ability to put them into play.
Wasn't that sort of the motivation behind Dorn staying in the solar system and not committing forces, because he needed to be sure that, when forces were committed, it was at the right place in the right time? Like, wasn't that the whole Beta Garmin thing? That was like the Titan death and the everything else death, the fire death, and it was it's like everything went there to die. But it was because, like, at that point, that was the only axis of advance for Horus and his forces, right? Like, the other warp routes had closed down, and so both sides, I think, knew that they did not want to fight a war with Titans and orbital bombardments on a scale that would result in like planet death, right? Like exterminatus, because both forces wanted to keep Terra, right? Like the prize was Terra, right? And if Terra is just dead, then it's not really much of a prize. So
it's a very good point. It's actually one of the biggest considerations Horus had for going after Paramar. And that's why Horus has a very interesting series of options here. He needs to take Paramar without it being wiped out, or like Dave just said, without exterminatus grade conditions, because then that prize is pretty useless to anybody. And it's definitely not a job for somebody like the World Eaters or the Night Lords, who would just annihilate it. They mentioned the Third Legion may have, a while ago, been a good choice for here, but definitely not now. Nobody really knows what they're out and about and doing, or what kind of the limits of their insanity is. The Sons of Horus may have been a good choice, the Legion themselves, but he has a kind of different option opened up for him here, because the Alpha Legion are kind of the newest and the least well-known of his inductees to the Nine Traitors. During the Istvan V massacre, they were definitely a lot more guarded in their joining and their actions on the planet itself, when the other legions were kind of in the giant planet-wide pincher movement that was the Urgal Depression and the following actions. So Horus has seen the Alpha Legion, that of course nobody really knows what they're doing at any given moment, and he needs them to he needs a test of loyalty, is what it comes down to, on a very large scale, because while their motivations were very ethereal to the other traitor legions at large, what we know from some of the Black Library books is a massive motivation for the Alpha Legion at Istvan V was to insert operatives into the Raven Guard. And there are a couple of different books and short stories that deal with this. Pretty sure the whole thread gets started in Deliverance Lost. Most of the general actions of the Alpha Legion against the Raven Guard kind of get started here, of how they infiltrate the Raven Guard with Astartes that were assumed dead, missing in action, killed in action on Istvan. In a couple of examples, they actually take the vocal cords and faces of dead Raven Guard Astartes and have them surgically implanted onto Alpha Legion operatives that are then inserted into kind of almost like the stream of refugees from the Raven Guard attempting to escape Istvan. And that's a very big point to their favor because, as we all know, the Raven Guard are some of the first to end up with the Mark 6 armor technology. They're also really on top of improving, not necessarily improving, but definitely bringing improvements to the induction process in their Raptor projects, which of course, being unable to just not fuck with things, the Alpha Guard Legion completely mess up for the Raven Guard. But we know that as, readers outside of the chain of events, but the Traitor Legions in the moment do not know that. They do not know the Alpha Legion's motivations very well. They never have. And Horus, while he does share a more in-depth relationship with Alpharius than pretty much any of the other Primarchs, which is a pretty common theme with Horus, he tends to kind of be the one Primarch that all the others know and respect and have developed relationships with, whereas there are plenty of lines of enmity between the other Primarchs and themselves. He needs that test of loyalty, and that's what Paramar is going to be. It would force them to show their loyalty on a Legion-wide scale, and it's not something like Istvan V that they could stand back and sort of take an assisting role in. It's something they're going to have to dedicate themselves to and really push into making a major commitment and a major sort of blooding of their Legion for this test of loyalty. And it's not really known how Alpharius and his Legion at large received these orders. We don't know if they were eager, we don't know if they were reticent to take them up, but Alpharius definitely kind of understands the risks and the motivations behind this move on Horus's part. So, even as there's still Void War going on around Istvan V, there are still Loyalist ships being bracketed and blown into scrap. There's definitely still engagements going on the surface of Istvan V. The Alpha Legion ships start to depart. So some of them are set off on individual operations, but a very vast armada of them, almost half of the entire Alpha Legion fleet, is sent towards Paramar, with the goal of subverting it without outright destruction. And this is followed shortly thereafter by a second armada composed of Mechanicum barks and these mass conveyance arcs that are loyal to the War Mech. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight, is to get through sort of, setting the board, that motivation and where everybody's going and why they're going there.
So Jason, where does that take us up to? Are we on page 22 now, or are we still on 21?
Through page 20 into the very beginning of page 21.
Okay, so right up to false flag.
Yes.
Cool, man. And we'll get into some of the tactics of the Alpha Legion, tactics that we can become more familiar with as we go into sort of the end of the Heresy, right? The Praetorian of Dorn, and then all of the what do they call that? There's a word for it.
The Alpha Legion tactical, it's called it's called the harrowing.
The harrowing, yeah, right. That's so fucking cool, man.
Well,
I love it. Do they use that in here?
Operative.
The name alone.
Right. I haven't run across it yet, but I'm betting they do.
I bet they do too. I'm definitely looking forward to getting into this more. And then
it's very entertaining because it's an entire process of inserting operatives and just really fucking with absolutely everything with a minimal amount of insertion of inserted operatives. And it's funny because in the Alpha Legion's actual Legion description in their history, they mention that they get to the point where they keep doing it even when it's not a great idea or not even necessary. It's just they're so used to doing it, they can't not do it.
That's just what they do. Yeah,
they're good at it.
Damn.
Cool. Well, I have a little challenge for our listeners. So I know we've got some folks out there that are really deep in the lore and also smart and way smarter than I am. So I have a challenge, right? So I talked about the stellar grid and the sort of the system data on page 19 for Paramar 5 when we sort of started talking about Paramar and where we were going. So the stellar grid for Paramar 5 is 44-URR, Uniform Romeo Romeo, /FT, Foxtrot Tango, 94. And the segmentum is solar terminus. So we can figure the solar terminus out pretty easily, right? That's the end of the terminus of the segmentum solar. But the other part of that, the stellar grid, the 44 URR and then FT, I wanted to look at that and see if I could decode it, right? This is, to me, this is one of those like riddles that Alan Bly has left us, right? What does this really mean? And I went way down the rabbit hole in this, guys. So I'm not sure that I have the answer, but I do have some clues, right? So I'm going to give you guys some clues to help us try to solve this riddle, right? So is this a real stellar grid, or is this just some logic and numbers that look like they make sense sometimes, but then they don't really line up to anything? So the other system data that we have in book 3, of course, is Istvan 5. Istvan 5 stellar grid is on page 35. Well, its planet data is on page 35. You can look at that. The stellar grid is 17 CIC, Charlie, India, Charlie, right? And then /LC, Lima, Charlie, 26. So just ignore the numbers for now. Those are wildly different alphanumeric designators, right? They're just wildly different. They're in completely different. If this were laid out on a grid, they would be in completely different grid systems, right? What is interesting is the first alpha designators have 3 letters in them, followed by 2 letters, right? So Uniform Romeo Romeo, followed by Foxtrot Tango. That's Paramar's information on page 19. And then you follow that on page 35, and it's the same. You've got 3 followed by 2 letters. So this led me to a hypothesis, right? And so you can't map the galaxy in 2D. All the maps of the galaxy that we see in the black books are mapped in 2D, but you can't map the galaxy in 2D because it's really 4-dimensional, but it's 3-dimensional at least. So it's possible that one of those alpha designators, one of those letter designators, is actually mapping it longitudinally, right? So if you think about it from sort of a central axis point, longitudinally speaking, right? And that central axis point could be the center of the galaxy, or it could be Terra. We don't really know. There's a central fixed axis. So it could be that. Now, I went through book 4 to see if the convention stayed the same, right? If there was consistency. And lo and behold, there was, right? And there's amazing consistency. So book 4, The Coronid Deeps, if you go back to some of our earlier podcasts on the Coronid Deeps, the systems and the planets are kind of collected in the back in this part of the book called the planets of the Coronid Deeps, I think, right? The principal worlds of the Coronid Deeps, which start on page 65 of book 4. And you go through, the first planet you come to is Mesoa. And so Mesoa has the stellar grid 41 HDK. All right, we'll just look at that for right now. HDK. So again, it's following the convention of 3 alpha designators followed by 2 alpha designators, followed by a numeric, right? So numeric, alpha, alpha numeric. And then you go through and you get to Grail. Grail is an HDD. So already you've got really close, right? So we know that Mesoa and Grail are close in terms of the segmentum as well as the subsector that they inhabit. So we've got we're off by just 7 digits or 7 alphas on the last designated there, right? So Mesowa is HDK, Grail is HDD, right? So we're 7 places off. So that's got to mean something. So then this was the real the light bulb moment when it went off, right? We look at Numinal. We look at Numinal, which is on page 74, and we have HDK. Well, what else is HDK? Mesowa, right? So we have now a code that we can sort of decode and construct. So Mesowa is HDK, and Numinal is HDK. Now Mesowa is 41 HDK, Numinal is 17 HDK, so we have a difference of 24. Could that be light years? Maybe. Maybe it's 24 light years. I don't know. It's 24 something. You look at the map and you can see that there is a significant distance, at least when it's mapped in 2D, between Mesowa and Numinal. So perhaps if you tilt the map on its axes, or if you blow it out and you create it in 3 dimensions, you now have some type of alignment between Mesowa and Numinal. So that's it. That's all I got. That's the extent of what my brain can handle. So I need your help, listeners, to solve the rest of this riddle and tell us that you've cracked the code and you've mapped everything out and it makes sense, and then explain it to me in my 8th grade math and English vocabulary, and I will be forever grateful and probably roll some kind of prize support together, at least give you a shout out if you can do that.
There might be a sticker involved or something like that. We'll see what happens.
I mean, it'd be definitely more than a sticker involved, at least from me. I would, yeah. But no, I thought that was really cool, guys. That I mean, there seems to be this logic behind stellar grid systems. Now, in sort of the wider 40,000 universe, there are conventions that have been adopted, right? And one of the conventions that was adopted is referring to, let me just bring this up here, but I believe the galactic north is, let me make sure I get this right. I think it is, stand by, Pat, you might have to cut some of this dead space out. Okay, the galactic north is referred to as spinward. So our galaxy is a spiral. If you were to look at it, it looks like a spin wheel, so you can figure out which direction is spinward. So the galactic north is referred to as spinward. The galactic west is referred to as the rimward. The galactic east is the coreward, right? And then the galactic south is trailing. Now those are fixed ideas. Those are fixed designators. And all the research I've done suggests that they're fixed relative to Terra, right? So that because Terra is the throne world, it's the birthplace of humanity, it's where everything comes together. It would make sense that in sort of the most ethnocentric way possible, that you would then refer to those cardinal directions in terms of spinward, coreward, trailing, and rimward.
I mean, you always want to have some type of static point in order to calculate where you're going, right? So
yeah. So that was what I did, guys, with my life for the last couple weeks. No, it was less than that, maybe a week. I tried to teach myself astrocartography. Stellar.
That's pretty amazing.
So, are you going to work for SpaceX, NASA, or what's the other company that's starting? Virgin Aerospace or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So it's interesting as far as I know, and there's got to be, obviously there's some method that NASA uses, right, when it calculates galaxies, but I think it's all light years, right? That's really all they're doing, is they're just calculating the distance away from galaxies. Or planets or stars that we can observe. I don't think anyone has actually mapped out the galaxy.
I mean, for all we know, NASA has a top secret project that is like a giant star map that, we just don't have access to.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if we can see enough of it to actually map it. Which led me down this other really fascinating rabbit hole, which was the way the Imperium uses navigators and really hard science to orient and travel through both real space and the warp, right? So like you're traveling through the warp, you're relying on some navigator's like fucking acid vision sketch, that is totally unintelligible to anyone else. He's like, you look at like some of the navigator charts and they look like, something that a 2-year-old would draw when he was like high on Tylenol. So that does not link up to hardcore science, right? So when you drop out of the warp, how do you then fix position? And so you hope that you come out at a place where you're supposed to, and then you sort of have these very sophisticated auger systems and arrays and auspecs that can sort of take a sounding and take a reading and try to fix your position. But it is not always accurate, and that's why ships can become what they call becalmed. Like, you don't fucking know where you are, dude. You dropped out of the warp. You're in real space, but you might be in a part of real space where, like, there's no map. There's no up, there's no down, there's no left, there's no right. You're just there, and you got to try to figure it out. So it is. It was a wild moment of realization for me, where I was like, man, these guys really are like out there in this vast ocean of nothingness, So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and if we've learned anything from a Gaunt's Ghost book, auger scanners never work.
Like, at any point, like, oh my god, like in Titanicus?
Oh yeah,
it's like,
forgot that one.
Cold weather, makes Auspex returns weird. Well, so do hot weather, and precipitation, and no precipitation, and dust, and atmospheric conditions, and, like, do they ever work at all?
Yeah, right.
And even when they do, what if your Titan just, doesn't feel like it? Because they have their own little, personalities.
Oh, you see that ant 3 miles away? Sorry, our Auspex are down. It's just
seems like I think it may be a possibility that the Imperium at large doesn't understand radar technology, and the Mechanicum hasn't understood it for eons, and they just tell everybody, like, oh, sorry, it's a glitch, like, cold weather makes it work poorly, when they really just don't know how it works in the first place.
So what I'm hearing is that they need to do a mass excavation on Terra of the old oceans to find a U-boat in order to get a working radar system.
It's a possibility, because they don't seem to know what's going on now.
Like, definitely not M41, right? Like,
No.
any possible knowledge that was lost is or they add is now been lost. But
Well, I mean, you now have in M41 you now have a gigantic rift, another one. So I mean,
All right, I keep forgetting about that.
yeah,
it's a newer, bigger, better rift. Great.
newer, bigger, better, more great unclean ones for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thanks for listening to that little crazy rabbit hole I went down, guys. And hopefully you can help us. Maybe if I had more time to dedicate to this, I could maybe figure it out if I had graph paper and I could just sketch it out. But I think there's a point at which my mind is not capable of dealing in 3 and 4 dimensions where it would break down.
I can only imagine the next time we have a game day, we walk into your front door and there's just shit scribbled all over the walls with Sharpies and
whiteboards. Yeah.
Like that Charlie Day photo everybody loves.
Right.
Just shit tacked all over the place. And
Pat, the cardinal points. It's all about the cardinal points. Oh.
Yeah.
Terrific.
But that's what we do. That's why you guys listen to us, because we do these ridiculous deep dives.
To figure this shit out for you, so you don't have to.
Yeah. Let our brains hurt for you.
I feel like a lot of our decoding projects, though, have actually borne fruit. We were able to decode Titan banners. That was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty sexy.
That worked. That made sense. I think the logic played out. We actually did that before Titanicus came out and confirmed a lot of sort of where we were going.
That was good timing on our part.
It was very fortuitous, We're just, I like to think we're just a little bit ahead of the bow wave, just maybe a little bit out there, We don't have any insider information, I promise you guys. We are, like, not that cool. I wish we were that cool. I wish we could have people from Forge World and Games Workshop on our podcast like the Age of Darkness does, right? And
we'll get there.
Some of the other podcasts in England. Who are the guys that actually get some of the big, right, like the Black Library guys to come on? Are they the Covenant of Fire guys?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm pretty sure Age of Darkness has had somebody on at least.
The independent characters did for a lot of different folks.
Yeah,
that's right. The independent characters, yeah, they're a top-notch podcast. But I guess it helps to live like next door too. Have people over.
Right. If I lived in Nottingham, you know.
If we drank beer together every night, you know, at the local pub.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my little crazy tangent tonight, guys. Sorry if that was distracting, and we'll get back
Not
to
the slightest.
We'll get back to regularly scheduled Paramar programming here.
Thank you, cartographer Dave.
Yeah.
All right, guys. That sounds like a good place for tonight.
Yeah. But I guess we'll figure out where we want to pick up for next week. And just a reminder, everybody, we're going to be Heresy Grad School is going to be taking a little bit of a break during August, just to, you know, get our wits about us and formulate a plan for your next set of content. But, you know, make sure to keep on listening to the main cast, and I'm sure Jason, Dave, and I might show up on there every once in a while, maybe. But, yeah. So I guess straight into plugs. Dave?
No, I don't have anything tonight, guys. Thanks for listening.
All right. Jason?
Same for me. Thanks for showing up and listening to us ramble.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. And I will I do have a couple quick shout-outs. One is play more Warhammer Fantasy.
Oh god, yes. Just
For heaven's sakes.
break out those square bases again.
Right. I know Jason is currently having a resurgence with his spicy dwarves, and Dave's got his gnome gunnery, and I've got my noble Bretonians. So
At least until I set them all on fire.
Yeah, that's right. But and then the other thing is, you know, check out our Patreon. It really helps make things better, and we're so close to our goal of 10 patrons, so that we can, you know, open up new topics to you guys and give you an option. You know, go ahead, Dave.
I will say that some of the questions you guys have posted to us on Facebook, we definitely read those, and we will try to get back to you on those. But if you're a Patreon subscriber, supporter, and you post those to us inside of Patreon, I will promise you that somebody will get back to you within a day or two at most. Just because it means something to us, it means something to me that you guys are supporting the cast, and so not to be like elitist about it, but you know, it's, you know, it'll make a difference, and I'll be able to get back to you guys a little bit quicker on some of those crazy questions.
Oh, except if it's a Custodes question, then we'll just make fun of you and then answer your question.
As true Thousand Sons, we hate Custodes and wolves in general, but you know. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and hope it's been a good episode. Now, fuck off, Craig.
You fuck off, Craig. You know what you did. Night, guys.
See ya.